Title: The Second Turn, Part 1. The full canvas. Mark Turner had lived a life of order. Suburban home, two-car garage, a loyal golden retriever, and the same position at a mid-sized insurance company for over 25 years. At 52, he had the kind of life that would make a Christmas card blush with envy. 2 kids off in college, a wife who managed a small home decor business, a mortgage nearly paid off, and a retirement plan fat with decades of careful contributions, and yet each morning, he found himself lingering longer in the shower, staring at the steam rising from the tiles like it might spell out some sort of sign. Some days, he would drive past the office, circle the block, and return, hoping no one noticed his small detour. He wasn't unhappy exactly, but there was a numbing, a deadening weight that had settled on his chest like an invisible hand. It started subtly. He found old sketchbooks while cleaning the attic. Pages filled with charcoal landscapes, ink-dotted cityscapes, portraits of people he once cared about. Mark had majored in fine arts before switching to business in his junior year of college. "You can't feed a family on watercolors," his father had said. He remembered nodding in agreement, not because he believed it, but because it seemed like the adult thing to do. Now holding those yellowed pages in his hand, something flickered. A faint echo of who he used to be. That night, long after his wife Janice had fallen asleep, Mark dug out an old tin box. Inside, he found a folded letter he had written to himself on his 25th birthday. "If by 50 you're not painting, go find a way back. Don't forget me." The words were almost childish in their honesty, and yet they cut through him sharper than any boardroom critique ever had. Part 2. Recharting the map. Mark started small. He bought a cheap sketch pad and some pencils from the local craft store. At first, he drew in secret, early mornings at the kitchen table, late nights in the garage. He began to feel moments of stillness again, the kind that had been missing for decades. Not happiness, not yet, but presence. He tried to share it with Janice one evening. "Remember how I used to draw all the time?" he asked over dinner. "Sure," she said, distracted, scrolling through orders on her tablet. "I think I want to start again. Seriously, maybe take a class downtown." She looked up, paused. "That's nice, just ... Don't quit your job or anything. Not now." That night, Mark stared at the ceiling for hours. The words hadn't been cruel, but they stung all the same. Not because she said them, but because he had feared she was right. Still, he enrolled in a weekend class. Every Saturday morning, he'd make the hour-long drive into the city. He was the oldest one in the room. Most were college kids, some retirees. He kept to himself, sketched, erased, and sketched again. Slowly, his lines grew more confident. The instructor, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, encouraged him to submit his pieces to a local community gallery. Why not? Mark said to himself. What was the worst that could happen? The first rejection came swiftly. The second came with a polite note. The third included a suggestion. Try more emotion. So he did. He painted a self-portrait, not the literal kind. It was a city street at night, wet from rain, lit by neon signs. A solitary figure stood beneath an awning, waiting. For what? Mark didn't know. But when he looked at the canvas, he felt something break open. This one was accepted. Janice didn't go to the exhibit. She had a vendor fair that weekend, his daughter texted. "That's cool, Dad." His son sent a thumbs-up emoji. Still, when strangers stopped in front of his painting and lingered, he felt a strange warmth. Someone, somewhere, saw him. Part 3. The cost of freedom. The promotion came unexpectedly. VP of Claims Processing. A bigger office, more staff, a bigger bonus. Mark was supposed to feel proud. Instead, he stared at the offer letter like it was a diagnosis. You'd be crazy not to take it, Janice said, eyes gleaming. All those years finally paying off. But that night, Mark couldn't breathe. Not in the panic attack way, just couldn't breathe. He turned it down. He quit 3 months later, the day after his last shift. Mark packed up his old Ford Explorer and drove west. He settled in a coastal town in Oregon, renting a small cottage overlooking the sea. The money would last a while if he was careful. Took freelance gigs here and there, taught an art class once a week at the community center. It wasn't glamorous. He ate a lot of soup. He learned to live without air conditioning. But every morning, he walked the cliffs and watched the gulls trace circles in the sky. He painted like he used to breathe, and he was alone. Janice didn't visit. The kids called once a week. Holidays were video chats, not gatherings. There were nights he stared at his hands and wondered if he'd made a mistake. If this was a late-life tantrum disguised as bravery. But then came a letter. From a woman in Colorado who had seen his painting online. She was 54. Her husband had died the year before. She said the painting reminded her of waiting, of still being here, even when everything else had left. "I didn't cry until I saw your painting," she wrote. "Thank you for making space for my grief." Mark read the letter 4 times. Then he cried. Part 4. The second turn. One quiet Wednesday morning, Mark received a call. The local library wanted to host a workshop for adults rediscovering creativity. A social worker had seen his art class and thought it could help with mental health. Mark said yes. 10 people showed up the first week. 20 by the next month. They weren't aspiring Picassos. They were former mechanics, widows, empty nesters, a retired nurse. Some hadn't drawn since grade school, but they came. And they stayed. One evening after class, a woman approached him. She was around his age, maybe older, she said. "I didn't come here to paint. I came because I was lonely. This place. ... It gives me something to look forward to." Mark nodded, heart swelling. He thought of the old letter in the tin box, the one that said, "Go find a way back." Me. He hadn't. Months later, Janice visited. She had gray in her hair now. They walked the beach. She asked if he was happy. "I think so," he said. "Not always, but more than I used to be." She nodded. "I think I'd like to try painting." And walked. Didn't talk about going back. Mark kept painting. Not for galleries, not for fame, but because it helped him remember who he was. And it helped others remember themselves. The second turn of his life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.